Hello, welcome to another edition of Between Two Nuts. And today I am sitting down with Continuum Trek, and we're going to be talking a little bit about everything to some extent. I am really glad that I could have him on today. I know it gets a little tricky with schedules and different things that we do, so it was really awesome to have him on here. And Continuum, thank you so much for coming on today. I know it's a lovely Sunday here. I know it's evening there for you, but how are you doing?
I'm fine, and thank you for having me on the show. I'm glad to be here. Yeah, it can be a bit, shall we say, what's the word, difficult, especially when you're living in different time zones. You're over in the States, I'm in Germany or in Europe,
hmm
and there's a 6 to 7 hour difference. So
Right.
yeah, it needs a lot of planning ahead. But no,
Yeah.
I'm glad to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, it's a little tricky. I had to go through that a little bit with Stig. I had to do that a little bit with Stevie J, just trying to figure out schedules and when
Mm,
everybody has kids or they have jobs and real life. Trying to get
mm,
everybody
mm.
on the same page at the same time can be difficult. So I really do appreciate you hopping on and having a chat with me. But I
Absolutely.
I you know continue. Why don't you tell people about your channel and a little bit about
Oh
the
yeah, of course.
stuff you do?
Sure. Well, my channel's called Continuum Trek. I do a Star Trek based YouTube channel, covering everything from lore to breakdowns, upcoming stuff. Sometimes live streams. Sometimes handle a bit of news,
hmm
but mainly I handle lore videos. Or for instance, at the moment I'm doing a series called Humanity's Trial. It's 2 episodes in. It's exploring everything about Star Trek from the TNG era, which will lead up, obviously, to Star Trek Picard and Star Trek Discovery season 3. So yeah, and it's a lot of hard work.
Yeah, that
The-
is. It absolutely is. There's just so many details, and you do great breakdowns of kind of like, especially if you want people, you're kind of like bringing people up to speed. That maybe are kind of little. Some people kind of are lost. They're like, well, wait a minute, how does this relate to this, and why is this, more significant? And that's a lot of your content's very thorough, I would say. Um,
oh, thank you.
I honestly do. I've referred the video to several people, and I'm like, your videos are different ones. You had some on the Borg, you had some other ones, and I love the whole Borg thing. It's one of the creepier things for me. Um, but I've referred the videos to other people, maybe who are just, they're getting introduced to Star Trek because they weren't really into it when they were younger, but as they're gotten older, they're
Mm.
like, they have more of a greater appreciation for it.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I was never a fan of the older show, the original series when I was a kid.
hmm
I grew up with the Next Generation era, so Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, and Voyager, and then Enterprise. However, I do have an appreciation for the show now. Obviously, it was a different time, different era. TV was done very differently back then
hmm
compared to now. So, it had to meet a certain sort of aesthetic and sort of style, especially in the 60s.
hmm
It's like I mean, if you compare the 60s Batman to the Batman we know and love today, it's very, very different. I mean, Batman today is very dark and somewhat gritty, but back then, Batman was a bit more sort of humorous and campy. You but he still, I have to say though, he had the coolest car.
Right.
He had the coolest Batmobile in the '60s show. That was a really cool car. But yeah,
Yeah, it's I think everyone kind of gets introduced to
mm,
Star Trek in different ways. I know for me, what got me into this, well, combination of two, but one was the Next Generation, of course. That got me in
mm,
very. I mean, I loved it when I was young, but I really enjoyed it, and I liked the characters and I liked the stories, and it seemed like a little bit more compared to the original, a little bit more modernizing and a lot more relatable. You know,
mm,
different genres, different times, but I have a fondness for Scotty from the original Star Trek.
yeah,
So I love my Scotty. So I was a big fan of that. When I was younger, that part of it,
mm,
just the humor. I loved humor, and I liked the idea of this whole futuristic world, lack of better words, and
mm.
going to all these different places and having that ability to be the new adventures. And it is like the next Robinson
Sure,
Crusoe, and all the adventure of the old times that we've had here on our planet. It's like, we're still discovering the ocean, don't get me wrong. That's like, like space essentially with all the different life we've yet to see, truly. but
Definitely.
space is the
Yeah.
next step. So it's like, to me, it's like that whole adventurous aspect to it. I think was like Star Trek, and even with some portions of Star Wars. But I think with Star Trek, it's more relatable and also something that's more futuristic and foreseeable. And a lot of that technology in Star Trek has kind of gone full circle. We're actually seeing some little bit of Star Trek technology coming into fruition already. It's just in different
Yeah.
ways.
Well, we're sort of using it now, really.
Mm-hmm.
Screen to screen communication.
Mm.
In real time, and it's great. I mean, I remember when this sort of thing was just coming out, and the picture would sort of get stuck. You could hear the audio very well, but the image would just remain still. And if you caught it on a bad day, it would catch you pulling a face.
Oh yeah,
But
it's true.
yeah,
But yeah, there was a
but
lot of technology you see there, and I just think it's cool. I think it's very cool.
mm,
You know, um, now with we had talked a little bit earlier. Obviously about family and
yeah,
kids and things like that, and because you are a dad and hey, I'm a squirrel mom. That's the way it goes.
mm,
But when you were growing up,
yeah.
who among like your friends or your family did you look up to the most when you were growing up as a kid?
Oh, depended when. I mean, when I was mainly my dad. I mean, he was away a lot due to the fact that he was in the army as well,
Mm,
and he went on to places. He was in the Falklands. He was in the first Gulf War. He went
mm,
Bosnia, Kosovo, all that. So different times. But mainly my dad. But I mean, I would look up to my mum as well, as in any way that I could. Because I mean, I mentioned before she was quite strict.
mm-hmm.
Sort of no nonsense. She's a no nonsense sort of woman. She's more relaxed now as she's coming up to she's soon coming up to her 60s,
Right,
a few years away from her 60s. But back then, when she was in her 20s and 30s, she was very sort of strict and proud, and maybe a bit too, a bit too strict and proud. uh, but yeah, she was sometimes hard to look up to because I sometimes, at least back then, I
right,
thought, she was just unfair and everything's,
right.
But as I grew up and I became obviously went from went from a boy and became a man. Obviously, things changed, and I had a different appreciation of a woman.
Mm-hmm.
There was also a teacher as well, a guy called Mr. Pridis. He
Mm-hmm.
was a very good teacher. He was a geography teacher,
Mm,
and he out of all the teachers we had, he was just fun. And you would actually learn. He'd teach you in a fun way.
right,
Rather than just writing something on the board. Okay, turn to page 28, and we're going to learn this today. Blah 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 blah.
mm-hmm.
He would actually take you out of class and explain things. Because it wasn't because geography for us wasn't just looking at a map and finding out places. It was about other stuff as well.
Right,
Hydroelectric power, how that all works. And we spent most of our time outside of class than we would in the class. And he
right,
was he was very. And I thought if I became an instructor in something or a teacher in something,
right,
that's how I'd want to teach. Yeah,
right.
and yeah,
It's
so
those people, especially teachers. You know, I had a couple that like they were just different. They were um, very much loved what they did for a living. They loved. I had one
definitely.
that was just a regular third grade teacher, and um, she was just so outgoing, and she genuinely cared about her students, and I appreciated that because unfortunately, times have changed. Things are changing pretty rapidly, and it's the teachers are different, and it's not meaning there's not good teachers out there because I do know quite a few great teachers, but it's a struggle, because of restrictions, whether it's by
Mm,
the state or the government or whatever, but they really go
mm,
out of their way to help their students and connect with the kids, and it's invaluable. It really is because at home some people may not have a parent there, or maybe they're being raised by their grandparents. I know for me, my
mm,
people I looked up to was my as far as role model was my grandmother, and my grandfather, of course, too. But it was just, and she really went out of her way to educate me about the world as much as she could, and doing all the things that, like a second mom would do, like where she was like kind of the checks and balances of things, and I could tell her things, and she'd give me that judgment. You shouldn't have done that, and you're gonna get your ass whooped, with love, and but at the same time, she was, very down to earth about it and much more realistic, and she started treating me a little bit more as an adult even as I got older. Even though she would still every now and then go back to being my grandma, she we became friends, and I think that it was a very powerful relationship in that sense because I got to understand her. I figured her out, meaning like because she was
Yeah.
former military, and she was World War II and all
Okay.
the things, and she had been stationed abroad. She was an officer in the army, and she was a head
Oh,
head nurse. And no nonsense is like the lesser word to describe that. So I she had a reputation, and she wasn't always liked by people, but she was definitely respected, and
yeah.
that was by every, including men. And at that time, that was a thing.
Mm.
So she never said to me, "Oh, you can't do something." And that to me, that's very
Yeah,
powerful
yeah.
to have an adult tell you, you know what, you can still do that. Yeah, you're a girl, and you might get some heat, or somebody might say something inappropriate, but in so many words or less, screw them. So you do you,
Yeah.
and do right by yourself. And if you see something wrong, say something, because it will come back to hurt you. If you don't be honest. It was about honesty. That was like big, very big impact on me, was how honest people were. The women, at least for me, my grandmother was exceptionally honest, almost brutally at times, but it was because she wanted me to understand it, not just live in a pipe dream. You know what I mean? So it's,
Definitely. Yeah. I mean,
valuable.
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, sorry. Go on.
No,
Go
no,
on.
no. Go right ahead. Go right
I
ahead.
thought you finished. So, yeah. Well, I mean, it's not that I did respect my mother. Always respected her, but it was just there were moments. For instance, it was sometimes difficult to understand what she wanted or
Mm-hmm.
how to take her. You
Mm-hmm.
know, because there were times, for instance, she would tell a joke, and because she was that kind of strict, you didn't know if the joke was funny, if she was making a joke,
R-
or she was being serious.
right.
And
Mm-hmm.
she sort of look at you, I was like, why is she looking at me? Is she waiting for me to laugh? Am I allowed to laugh?
Right.
Yeah,
You're like,
and
is this a
yeah,
trap?
yeah, but it'll be on a subject that, for instance, something we spoke about, that maybe something I got into trouble for or something,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm just not sure. Is she making a joke or is she making a comment? I'm not sure. Do I laugh? Do I not? Because it was, is it funny? Is it not? I just wait for her to give me permission before I laugh.
Yeah, you learn that quickly. You're like,
Yeah.
if I'm laughing at the wrong thing, this could go really bad.
What happened before where she said something and I guess I took it, got the wrong context, whatever, and I laughed and she didn't. I wasn't supposed to laugh.
Oh no.
Yeah.
Oh God. Now, did your mom, and I say this, but did your mom have a look that she would give you when you know that this was a bad idea? Like, does she have the mom
Yes.
look?
Yes. There were two or three, I don't remember. One of them was wait till your father gets home. Like she'd
Oh.
find out like I skipped school or something. She
Mm.
wouldn't shout at me. She wouldn't say anything to me. She just look, you know, she just look at me with a raised eyebrow, smile, and just turn around and go make a,
Oh.
put the kettle on or something, or
Oh.
go to another room. I'm like, oh shit.
The eyebrow. No.
Oh yeah. Or there was of course where she just close her eyes, have a grin, and shake her head,
Oh.
and then walk out. And I'm like, oh, she's disappointed. She's disappointed in me.
It's
Oh
that,
no.
yeah. That's like
Yeah.
the worst feeling because they don't even have to say anything. That's just that look of,
Mm.
well, you're disappointing. And you're like, oh, I'll hear about this later somehow.
And
Oh,
then
yeah.
there was the angry eyebrow with the pursed lip,
Oh,
and then she'd just shake her head
oh,
and then walk away. Oh God, I'm in trouble now.
oh, yeah. There's mom looks like
Yeah.
it's. I think it's a magical thing. Like when you figure out that mom look, my eldest,
Mm.
he's older, obviously. He's, but like he knows the look, and if I give him the look because he's being an ass or whatever, like, because you have to get creative when you discipline kids over time. You
Mm.
know, I really do because, uh, you know. Some people just you hear people like, well, I spank my kids or I do this. And yeah, you know, the time and a place, obviously. But overall, sometimes you can literally handle a situation with just a tone and a
Definitely.
look, and
Yeah.
that's good enough. Like he got sassy with me like a couple months ago.
As they do.
Oh
Kids
yeah,
do.
he
Yeah.
was saying something to be coy, and I had a ketchup like one of those little ketchup packets, and I opened it, and I just like I slapped it in the back of his head from across the room. I was like, and he was like, "Oh, I'm covered in ketchup." I'm like, "Well, it looks like you're doing laundry. Have fun." I'm like, think again, sir. So like, you know, if he knows I start looking for something, it's either gonna be a shoe or it's gonna be ketchup or a sauce packet or something. You know, whatever I can find. But yeah, like
Yeah.
you know, the look works most of the time though. So it's like he knows when I'm ticked
Mm.
off, and he gets like, "Oh man, are you upset?"
Definitely.
I'm like, well, not at you. He's like, oh, thank God. Like, he's like, which one are you mad at? I'm like, oh, it's this, you know, because I have three squirrels. I'm like, oh, it's the youngest or it's the middle. He's like, oh, it's not me, thank God. So now, were you brought up as an only child, or do you have siblings?
No, I was an only child. Yeah, so I mean, I did ask for kids, sorry, for I did ask for siblings,
Mm-hmm.
especially when I was about 5 years old, 4 years old,
Mm-hmm.
and for the first time, we moved from Germany back to UK, a place called Blandford, which was sort of like an army college. My old man was doing his engineering degree at the time,
Mm.
in the signals, and I bumped into this guy called Owen Bruin. He was my age, and he had an older brother. And I never met anyone
Oh.
before with an older brother. So I went back home at the end of obviously when it's time to go in, and I went, Mom, Dad, what? Can I have an older brother? He went, well, no. Because I didn't understand. I was 4 years old. Yeah, well, 3.5, 4 years old. And I said, but he's got one. I want one.
Right? Like
Can I have an
there's
older brother?
it's cute how like when we were little because that's what I wanted. I wanted an older sister, and I was like,
Yeah.
I asked my mom, "Can I have an older sister?" And she's like, "That is not possible." And I was like, "What do you mean?" Because you know I was like probably about 5, you know,
Yeah.
because I really wanted an older sibling. I was like, "Can I have an older sister?" You know, and like I wanted you know who I wanted? I wanted Linda Carter. I was like, I want Linda Carter to be my sister, and my mom was like, honey, I don't think that's possible. I think she's got her own kids or something, you know, like she's like, honey, no, you know, like
Yeah.
she's my age. I'm like, well, whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah, like when you're little though, you don't really grasp that. I did want
No.
siblings too, though, for sure. I went through that phase, and eventually you grow out of it, and you're like, well, actually, this isn't
Mm,
so bad. I don't have people going through my crap.
definitely. Well, I mean, it's one of the reasons actually how I got to start because I think it was a lot harder to socialize with other people when you don't, especially if you're an only kid,
Mhm.
and you're moving around from place to place. Because my man, unlike me, my career was well, at least my promotion, sort of say, I promoted very slowly, but I was a different trade to my man. Um, he promoted very quick. He promoted every other year
Whoa.
almost up until he got his warrant officer class 2. He promoted very quickly. So we could have spent anywhere from 8 months to maximum of 4 years in a place, then we move again.
Wow.
So constantly moving, leaving one school after another and after another. So always having to say goodbye to friends, move to a new location, move to
Mm.
make new friends, all that. It got to a point when I decided not to. We moved to one place and decided not to make any new friends just in case we end up leaving again. Little did I know, of course, when we moved there, we're going to be there for 4 years.
Right.
Because I was sort of, I mean, I wasn't living out of a suitcase, I didn't have that mentality, but I did have this mentality of, you know, we better be ready to move, be ready to drop everything, let
Right.
everything go at the drop of a hat. And that's how I got to Star Trek because everywhere we moved, there was always Star Trek in any language, regardless what country we moved to, or where we moved to. It was either, Germany, you could get it on Sky TV and in English, or if you couldn't get a good reception for satellite TV back then, because you had the old dishes back then,
Mhm.
before Netflix and all that. you then watch it in German. So I'd learn German and watch it that way. But everywhere I went, there was always Star Trek, and I just got into it, and that was never really looked back.
It's funny
Yeah.
how that works too. It's like
Mm.
when you're an only child too, I feel like you have a whole lot of more. You're more observant to things. That's one, but
Yeah.
also observant to adults. You do pay attention to what adults do and how they interact, and also you find a lot more interests and hobbies. Like I would cling to things more easily than my friends would be. I'd be like I'd want to learn everything about one subject, and I would
Mm.
figure out everything about it as much as it was available in like a bookstore or whatever. And then I'd move on to something else. But my other friends, they either had siblings or things like that. You moved around a lot though, so that's a whole nother dynamic because you get so
Yeah.
it does take away that, what do you call it? There's this feeling that people, how like some people, whether it's abroad here or in the states or whatever, but they
Yeah.
live in the same town or city their entire lives and they never move. And that's always blown my mind a little bit. I'm like, wow, what's that like?
Mm.
Like to be born, raised, and die in the same place. It it just it
Mm. Well,
it's weird to me. I moved when I was in middle school from the East Coast
mm,
to the West Coast, and after that, it was like I had to start all over, and I was like, okay, whatever. You just kind of go, okay, this isn't
definitely.
that
Yeah,
bad.
definitely. I
But
mean, I suppose it depends on
hmm
what it is you want to do. I mean, for me, I always wanted to have a place where we had roots. I mean, for instance, my dad came from Manchester. My
mm,
mum came from a place called Reda Wiedenbrook in German.
mm,
So here in Germany. So yeah, I had grandparents there, grandparents in Manchester, uncles, aunts, and everything else. But we as a family, so me, my mum, and my dad, never had a place where we sit down and just settle down and this is where we call home.
right.
You know, which is so it was quite bizarre because I often wondered. I bet that's a lot better, than just
Yeah.
moving around place to place to place. Because I mean, when I go from an army school to a school back in the UK, because
Mm,
if you're a person in Germany, these camps have their own schools for the kids, proper high
right.
schools and everything,
hmm
and they'll have a different curriculum to the national curriculum in England. So there'll be, if I start a new year in school, they'll be touching something on something that I already did in the previous year in the other school,
Right.
but they'll also be touching on things that they've learned the previous year that I've never even heard of. So I'm learning it for the first time, and it did throw things off for me. But I will hopefully. I mean, depending on how the next few years go now, gonna have to start saving, obviously. But in the next few years, I'm planning to move back to UK now, and so probably I'll go back to Manchester, Warrington, or a place called Harrogate,
Okay.
and just settle down there, and maybe I don't know, maybe meet another wonderful woman, and maybe start a family again someday.
hmm
Maybe
Right.
if they
And
have me.
and that's the thing too is like we that's I think that's one thing a lot of people do struggle with is an example, and I think that resilience, right, to move from one country, go back to a new one, find a certain area, and be like, you know what, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to start over. That's really difficult for a lot of people to do. I know that I'm originally from Florida. We moved to Arizona, lived there for a while. 15 year. I was born and raised primarily in Miami, Florida, and then lived in
Mm-hmm.
Arizona 15 years, and then got the hell out, thank God, and lived in New
Yeah.
Mexico for 6 years, and then we decided on Texas, and never thought I'd be in Texas,
Cool.
but it was such a big because we moved to a place that neither one of us had any family local. It was
Mm-hmm.
just a chance. And I was like, you know what? This is a good thing. Like, it was a very liberating feeling to be like, okay, starting over. And it takes time, and you have to find your rhythm into, the new area you live into and travel a little bit throughout the state. We have a massive state, obviously, but even so, that was a lot of excitement to it. It's a little bit of an adventure for you as an individual because it's a whole new, it's starting over. It's not easy, but once everything the dust is settled from a move and you're like, you know what, this is a good thing. Like the energy's different. This is stuff that I can work with and I'm content here. Like I don't feel stuck. You know, I don't like that feeling of feeling stuck
Yeah, that's
anywhere.
good.
Even if I like having roots, this is a place that I'm completely happy having roots here. But at the same time, I know, oh, I can travel here, I can travel there. We're close to the Gulf of Mexico. And I grew up on the Gulf of Mexico. For me as a kid, so my grandfather was a very big fisherman
Yeah,
and hunter. So I was always out there with him tagging along.
cool.
So I really enjoy
That's cool.
I really love, the Gulf of Mexico. So going to the Gulf again was like going home, even though I'm not in Florida, which is fine, totally fine because they can have those hurricanes. But I really, going home again, you can't really do, and that's the hardest thing too.
No,
I realized because I did
it
go
is.
back, and it was not the same. I was like, yeah, I don't belong here, you
Mm.
know. But
Well, there's been some times where I've driven past somewhere. Say if I'm on a long trip in the car, going somewhere, and I mean, I'm passing by an old town that we once lived in.
mhm,
There's been once or twice where I got off the autobahn, or what the German calls the motorway,
mhm,
the autobahn, and I thought I'd just give it a quick look, have a look around, And some places have changed drastically, some of them barely changed at all, you know.
right,
And so I just drove around, then obviously turned around, went back on the motorway, and carried on my travels. But when you talk about Florida, I've been to Florida twice. Once in 2017, sorry, once in 1997,
okay,
and once in 2007. I was in Orlando both times,
oh, okay.
and I have to say, I had an absolutely fantastic time. Do you ever go back there to Florida?
Yep. I have family that live in Orlando, Altamont Springs area, all around that
Mm-hmm.
area. A lot of them moved out of Miami, and they moved either to the upper part of Florida, northern part there near Orlando,
Mm-hmm.
Altamont Springs, Winter Haven, and then I have quite a few friends that live in that area still, and then I have a lot of family that are in North Carolina. So it's like everyone's spread out. I have family in the middle of the country, in Illinois,
Yeah.
Chicago area, and then I have family that are scattered. But yes, most of my family on my dad's side and a lot of my friends I grew up with when I was younger, they live in the Orlando area, and I love the area. I love going back to Florida to visit. It's I see pieces of like my childhood here and there, but um,
Yeah.
none of my family. A lot of them moved out of Miami just primarily because overcrowding. It's a city. There's hurricanes. You're kind of screwed if something's coming inland,
Yeah.
So they just.
Definitely.
I
No, I
love.
know what you
Yeah,
mean.
I love Florida though. It's when they had that really terrible oil spill, like God, many years ago with the BP oil spill. I was devastated, when that happened because I knew that it was going to affect the Gulf, and it still is to a greater extent. But to be able to go back to it though and see that they're still trying to, there's a lot of people who are still going there doing cleanup, trying to work on the wildlife, trying to, preserve what they can for like, because there's so many amazing things to see, with the, I guess, lack of better words, like the swamp areas and, the marshes and things with the cranes and the animals, the birds, just a lot of beautiful wildlife in the Gulf. And Florida's, it's a very
Definitely.
unusual state. So, yes, there's Florida man stories that come out of there all the time, but, but the people,
Yeah.
but generally people are pretty chill. I mean, I miss Florida. Yeah, I do. But Squirrel, he's from originally New Mexico, and he has that same nostalgia. And New Mexico is really beautiful, but I can't live there.
That's where the aliens crashed, isn't it? New
Oh
Mexico?
yeah, Roswell, yeah, down there,
Yeah.
more south. We went there too. I was like, we're gonna go to Roswell, so we did. But I didn't see anything, unusual per se.
Yeah.
But it was a lot of fun. We took the kids and stuff. But
Cool.
there's a lot of beautiful places all over. I have not been abroad yet. I have friends that live in the UK, and they're like, "Oh, you can come and we'll do this." I'm like, "Man, it's making the time to do it because
Yeah.
I want to
Definitely.
go. I want to go see things and not just historical places, but just see the different towns and little villages and stuff that are around. And there's a lot of
Mm.
really awesome people.
Well, I mean, if you were, well, I don't know. I mean, if you go out, still have a nightlife now and again. If you go, have a girls' night out or at any point.
Right.
But if you're looking for nightlife, you want to go to places like Manchester, Liverpool, or
Mm.
in the North area.
Mhm.
People are a lot more Northerners are a lot more fun. Where Southerners are a bit more serious,
Mhm.
about things. Um, but if you're looking for culture and art and everything else, and you want to see the sights, then go to London.
Mhm.
Obviously, go by past the palace and everything else, Big Ben, all that, on the bridge. But for a really good time, go up north.
Okay.
Newcastle, Manchester, Birmingham, Liverpool, Warrington. That's all the best. That's where you have a good time. But for, as I said, to see the sights and everything,
Yeah.
just go to London.
My
Yeah.
mom, when I was very young, she went to we had friends that were from England, and my mom spent almost a year there, and she was up there in the north, and she had a great time. She
Yeah.
absolutely loved it. She was there about a year, and she was really contemplating moving us there. I could tell because
Mhm.
she kept bringing it up, but it didn't happen because just different, visas and all that other stuff at the time. But she had so much fun, and there were so many wonderful people she knew and met, and went to. Just the nightlife was fun. And this was back in like the 80s when she went, and I was very little at the time, but she had a lot of fun. And when she came back, she had a very, very slight accent, and I was like, "What is that?" Like it was very odd. I was like, "What?" Like, and she was like, she'd say certain words, and it was obviously like wherever the region she was in or whoever she was around, she was picking up this accent on a specific phrase or word, and like she'd say, "You like that?" and it would have like a little accent there, and I'm like, "What?" Like, mom, like what are you? But she loved it, and she was like, it's definitely, she met a lot of wonderful people, and it was an experience that you know she was out of control. My mother was out of control, and because she had a problem with British. I was like, you have an obsession with British men. That's the truth, okay? With her Phil Collins
Yeah.
and Sting, I'm like, you need to calm down. And it was the Beatles. I'm like, this British
Phil Collins
invasion.
estate.
I was like, this British
Yeah.
invasion in my house has got to go. You know what I mean? Like, this is too
Thing
much.
is, things when we go on about Phil Collins and Sting and Peter Gabriel, all the men in the UK go, really?
Right?
Phil Collins, Sting, they're ugly.
I
Yeah,
know.
but they're not. They're rock stars. Yeah, of course. That's what it is.
Yep. I know. I
Yeah.
was like, because Peter Gabriel, okay, he's talented, okay, Sting, okay. I don't get it, but her obsession was just like out of control. Like I was like, you need to calm down. This is getting serious. Um, but yeah, like I used to make fun of her a lot because that's what I do. But that's what you do as a young
Well,
person.
I had a girlfriend who, when it was back in the 90s, and I was just in my last years of high school, she had a thing for Liam Gallagher, at the time the lead singer of Oasis.
Oh my
And I went,
gosh, really?
Liam Gallagher, that
Ugh.
lanky streak of that lanky streak of piss. Sorry, can I swear
No,
on
go
this?
right
Sorry.
ahead. You go right ahead.
Okay. I
Yeah.
said that really that lanky streak of piss. He went, yeah, he's really hot. He's got attitude and all that.
He
He
has a
doesn't care.
unibrow. He has a
They're like,
unibrow.
oh, this is, and he used to exaggerate the Manchester accent as well.
Yeah.
This come and have a go, think you're hard enough. Well, hard.
Ugh.
You think, but you listen to his brother. His brother speaks normally,
Right.
but Liam, he just really exaggerate the accent and act dead hard. And unfortunately, when guys my age
Mhm.
realised that girls like this, they all started doing it, and you're like, oh
Ugh.
no,
No.
everyone's a Liam Gallagher.
And like honestly, the first time I heard Oasis, right, I was like, they're trying to be like the Beatles or something. Like, you know what I mean? That really,
Yeah,
why, I don't know. I'm not
yeah,
a fan of the Beatles. I respect them. I
and it
get it.
worked.
But yes, it did. And I knew people that liked him. I'm like, why? The guy is not. He's not an attractive dude. Like, this isn't somebody I'd be like, oh, give me some of that. Like, like that's not.
Well,
That's
the
not
thing
even a.
about
Ugh.
the thing, yeah, the thing about Oasis was, I mean, it was the brother Noel who wrote and played the songs,
Mhm.
and I mean, everyone's impression about Liam was essentially he wasn't doing anything with his life. He was just getting drunk in the pub, and his parents told Noel, "Look, can you just get him out the pub, take him with you, let him sing a bit?" Yeah, he went, "All right." So
They
that
were
was
like,
it. But what Oasis was, because we went, it's like that song, Video Killed the Radio Star, where,
mhm.
you didn't have to be good looking to be talented and produce good music. I mean, you look at Mark Knopfler from Dire Straits. he did outstanding music
Yeah.
with Dire Straits, but he wasn't. But a lot of these bands like Dire Straits, they ended up dying off because
Mm-hmm.
all these, essentially the first Justin Bieber came along back in the 80s and started doing videos, and that was the new format for music.
Right.
And so all the sort of say less good-looking guys sort of disappeared.
That's
And
true.
then one
Mm-hmm.
thing Oasis did was sort of bring that back, where you didn't have to be good-looking,
Right.
to make music or to become a rock star. You could just do it. If it worked for Mick Jagger, it will work for
Ugh,
Oasis. And
man, that's so true.
or
Oh
Steve
man.
Tyler. I mean, they are not good-looking guys,
Just like Rod
but hey,
Stewart. Rod Stewart is another one. Like that's one that Calm Squirrel's like.
yeah.
We had this discussion about he hates Rod Stewart. He's like, I don't get it. I don't get it. Like how this guy is a sex symbol or was a sex symbol or I don't get it. I'm like, honey, that's a whole nother time. I don't even know. It's part of that unattractive skinny male thing, kind of like the Mick Jagger thing,
Yeah,
Where
it was yeah. I think when it was Bowie, David Bowie and Rod Stewart that started this new romantic thing, and then look
yeah.
in the 80s, we then had guys like Duran Duran, Adam Ant, who sort of really pushed that to the extreme. And they wore these sort of weird outfits and gave themselves funny names, like Ziggy Stardust or Gary Glitter, things like
Mhm.
that. And so they really went from glitter rock to sort of new romantics, and then it got really emphasized in the 80s.
Yep.
But yeah, it was
Yeah,
interesting stuff.
it is because a lot of these, like okay, Jim Morrison, okay, like sign me up, like that. Because I love
Yeah.
his music, I like his personality, even as dysfunctional as it was, and
Hmm.
attractive dude, sign me up. I don't understand Mick Jagger, I don't get it. Beatles. Okay, there's a story. My mother was a huge Beatles person. I feel like that's the reason why. I'll be honest with you, I don't like them. It's because I think
Yeah. Okay.
she just overdosed me on them when I was a kid, and I was like, I don't care. I just don't
Hmm.
care, mom. And I understood, John
Hmm.
Lennon. I understood the whole Paul McCartney, but her thing was Ringo Starr. I don't get it. And he was touring here in the States. She went and saw him, and she was like in third row. And of course, I made fun of her because I was like, because I don't, it's not that I don't think they're bad people. It's not like that. I don't care for their music. It's very simple. But he was like a god, right? So after she went and saw him,
Hmm.
I asked her, I says, "Oh, did you throw your underwear at Ringo?" And she's like, "Don't you disrespect Ringo?" Blah 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 blah. Blah. I was like, "Are you serious? This is just a guy wearing rings, playing the drums in his band, touring. Throw your underwear at him. Who cares?"
Yeah.
And but it was like she really loved them, and I did not get it. Like I don't. I'm looking at this is a boy band, and I'm like, let's look at this boy band who took
Yeah.
off and did all the. They're all talented in their own ways. George Harrison, all of them. And I told her, I said, but I don't get it. I can appreciate like George Harrison's music over Paul McCartney's. I can appreciate some parts of Paul McCartney over John Lennon's music. But in the end, I'm not a fan. Like I'm not going to go out of my way. I'm not trying to be a jerk. It's just not my
Yeah.
thing.
Definitely. Yeah.
So I've never got into that obsession stuff. I didn't understand it. And my mom was just, yeah, the Beatles, man. I was like, what? I don't get it. They're very talented. And I like their older, I would say like their stuff from the 60s a lot more than like their doo-woppy crap with the
Yeah.
Beatle hair. It's a little much.
Well,
But,
they went. I mean, the Beatles they came in with a slightly faster beat than everyone else. You
mm-hmm.
had, especially in England. I mean, England you had, you know, the the nice boy who every mother wants their daughter to go out with.
Right.
Like Cliff Richard. He was very holy, very clean and nice. And then along come the Beatles with Help and all these other songs
Yep.
that they just sort of shook things up a bit, not too much. But then later on, I think, come to the end of the '60s, beginning of the '70s, they then really sort of hit some what was considered then some hard notes. I think it was just after Yoko Ono came in, or got married to Yoko Ono, they did some stuff together that was a little bit more wild. But after
Mm-hmm.
that, then obviously the band broke up, and you know the
Rip.
girls were left. The girls, unfortunately, were just left with the Monkeys and other bands like that. Davy Jones.
And here's the thing about the monkeys, at least, is like I like the show. Like they had the monkeys TV show. And
Mm.
that's honestly how
I remember that.
like I watched the reruns of that, right? And I was like,
Yeah,
these
yeah,
guys are all like kooky and like goofy, and I was like, I kind of dig this, and I like that whole idea of it. I was like, I like the fact that they don't take themselves very seriously, and it's got that slapstick to it a little bit. But yeah, like that was entertaining to me. I was like, this is fun, like, and they were all kind of goofy, and I was like, this is cool. But it's the seriousness and things that come in, when they all split up, and John went his way with Yoko, and then George went his way, Ringo too, and Paul, and they all got like serious and deep and all this stuff. I was like, whoa. I mean, and that's a good thing. I understand it's the times, and it was part of the evolution of music as well, and to kind of push that envelope and move forward. But it got very serious for a while, and it was in the 80s you started to see more like lighter stuff from them. So like, although
yeah,
unfortunately,
yeah.
but you saw it from
Mm,
George and you saw it from Paul with Wings, and I was like, okay, like
mm,
every year I hear that Christmas song from them, and I'm like, this is a little too much. Simply having a wonderful Christmas time. If I hear
yeah.
that any more than once, it's gonna be a great season.
We, we have one in England and well, UK, and it was one that was made in the 80s called Live Aid or Band Aid, whatever they're called.
Yeah.
And you had Sting and Phil Collins and all these
Oh,
other George Michael, them,
do
and
they
it's a
know
song
it's?
called
I'm sorry.
Oh God,
I know what you're
yes,
talking about. I know what you're talking about. It's do they know it's Christmas or something like
yeah,
that? And now it was like
yeah,
about. Yes, I remember that because I saw the video for it recently, and because I remembered that whole Live Aid thing. And
yeah,
but yeah, or do they know it's Christmas time? And it had a bunch of different
yeah. That's the
people.
one. Yeah,
Yeah, and it was. I like that kind of stuff in a way. Like when I was a kid, like my oh, they'll age me, but whatever. When I graduated from kindergarten, my song that they played was "We Are the World, We Are the Children." um,
yeah, that one.
with
Yeah,
Whitney, and I remember that. And so, like when Live Aid had all that stuff, it was pretty amazing to have these ensembles. Now we look back on it, and we're like, wow, that
hmm.
that was really cool. But yeah, I remember that whole Live Aid thing for a while, and I liked the performances they did. Whether it was for Live Aid or um,
Oh, the
something.
concert itself was great.
Oh
Yeah,
man.
they had some really top-notch acts on,
Mm-hmm.
and building something like that, especially back then, to put a concert like that, which was in different locations of the world,
Yeah.
to go on, one after the other, so on and so forth, without the power of the internet or any of that. That was phenomenal. Absolutely kudos. But but every year, and they still play it now. I mean, there is a remake of the song. I think I heard it only for twice, and then they got rid of it. But they always still play the original, and that is, do they know it's Christmas time at all? You're like,
Yes.
oh God, just stop.
Oh
Forget it.
yeah. Yeah.
You
And that
what? Yeah,
oh man, that song. And it's like it's a beautiful song, but they play it on repeat.
over and over again.
Oh,
Yeah,
I feel like it's that, and then, simply
yeah.
having a wonderful Christmas time.
Wonderful Christmas time.
And I'm
but
like,
that is
oh,
but that is something you
oh.
don't see. Sorry, go on.
No, no, but it's just that,
Go
and
on.
they overplay it, man. They just overplay those songs. That's my only
Yeah.
complaint. I love Live
Definitely.
Aid, I appreciate it, but good lord. Go ahead. I'm
That's
sorry.
something you don't see anymore, though, isn't it? Is proper
Mm-hmm.
Christmas songs anymore being made? You'll get it's like someone might do a festive song, but I think the last real Christmas song that I think I saw any singer do, I think was Mariah Carey.
Mm.
Which was
Yeah.
All I Want for Christmas.
Yep.
After that, I don't think another one was ever made, as
No,
far as I know.
yeah, I mean, everyone has their albums. Like, oh, Christopher Lee, right? He did some Christmas albums that was heavy metal, black metal, of Christopher Lee singing Christmas carols. It is by far the most entertaining listen you will appreciate.
Who was this?
Christopher Lee, the
The
actor.
actor.
And yes, and he's singing
Okay.
black metal Christmas songs. You can find him on Spotify. And we played it last year, and it was epically beautiful. It is just like he's just like, oh god, Jingle Hell, I think is what. I can't. Oh, it's so great, and I highly recommend it. It's just that to me was like that came out. Obviously, there were several albums he did, like regular, death metal. So it's perfect. It fits.
Hmm.
But the Christmas is pure classic. And one of my friends that sent it to me as as a link on, I don't know, Facebook or something a
Mm.
while like years ago, and I was like, this is the best thing ever made. You know, I'm like, I don't know why,
Yeah.
but it's hilarious. And yeah, but I know that we listen a lot more to classic Christmas music, like not, more of like
Mm.
Burl Ives maybe, or Frank Sinatra, Dean Martin, that kind of stuff, and
Definitely. Yeah. Yeah.
Nat King Cole. Um, there
Mm.
isn't like that's most of the albums we have like on hand, but as far as like on Spotify and stuff, like we have like the old Chipmunks, for like the kids, like
Definitely. Yeah.
the Christmas album from the
Mm.
Chipmunks and stuff, but there really isn't anything newer. I think that really sticks out. I know William Shatner's going to be releasing a Christmas album. I know he was doing a jazz
He's
one.
not.
No,
Oh no.
I know that
Okay.
he's doing some kind of jazz album that's coming out. I don't know if it's going to be Christmas themed, but it is coming out. I don't know when, but
Mm. Well, for the reason I say oh no is there was once on some talk show he went on, he sang Rocket Man and he could not sing, and
oh
it's
yeah,
really, really bad. In fact, he's not even singing; he's sort of speaking the words,
yeah, kind of
with the song going in the background.
like
And you're like, yeah, don't, don't ever take up singing. Just do acting. Stick to acting. You're great.
the
Because he's
first
not a
thing.
great director or a great writer either. I
Mhm.
mean, he did it. For instance, the movie Star Trek Five.
Mhm.
He wrote and directed that movie, and it is one of, if not the worst Star Trek movie out of the original series guys. You know, I mean, okay, there were some things. There was a writer's strike on at the time, everything else, but some of the outlandish ideas he came up with for that movie, like a three-breasted cat lady. You see her dancing on this, in this strip club outside the embassy on some planet somewhere.
Mhm.
And that was Will Shatner. He came up with that idea, a three-breasted Catwoman, and obviously he would end up, in bed with this Catwoman, but obviously that never happened. But yeah,
That wouldn't have
Will
surprised
Shatner
me.
will try new things. He will try sort of, leave his comfort zone, but he's just not very good at it. And I think he just stick to acting and that's it. And or presenting, he's
Yeah.
presenting a new sort of like a unsolved mysteries show sort of thing now.
Yes.
You
Yeah.
know,
Like
and
it's
yeah,
unexplained or something. I forgot the name of
that's
it.
the one. Yeah, I've
Um.
not watched it myself. It's not on Netflix, so
Yeah, I haven't caught it either. Like we went and met
mm,
him last year,
yeah, cool.
and I took my daughter with me, and because I already knew, like,
Mm,
I was like, I'm gonna take my daughter, because I think it'd be cool for her. And my middle son, he enjoys Star Trek to a point.
mm,
He's still kind of like catching, figuring it out. But with her,
yeah,
she liked the fact because I, introduced her to it for, to him a little bit before we went, so she understood kind of like who we're meeting and stuff. And she liked the idea that he does the charities with the horses, and he does a lot of work with special needs kids and stuff like that, and a lot of charity work. And she liked the whole idea about the horses and all that. So anyway, we went to go meet him, and I knew that, and this is me being me, but I took my daughter because I was like, I don't want to have a bad impression of him, you know, by any means, because I know that he can get moody,
yeah,
a little moody. It's gonna be what it is. So I took my daughter with me because I knew that that would quell any issues. That way he'd be a little friendlier. And he spent the whole time talking to her.
definitely.
And he was
Mm.
so kind and very sweet. And he was sweet to a child. It was with his dad, and dad's like a super Trekkie, and you could tell the son was like, I don't give a damn. And he
Yeah,
kind of hid from him, and he's like, I didn't do anything. And he was trying to coax him to come see him, and he took time to talk to the little boy. And it was, because when you go and do the, like the meet and greets, because we went to the San Antonio Comic Con, Alamo City, big one. It's massive. We didn't go
mm,
this year, but last year was a lot of people there. But it, he did wonderfully with children, and I think that because with adults, I mean, there's so many things that I respect him in the context that he can be a dick, and I think he knows it. He can absolutely be a
yeah.
dick. That's without a question. But he's aware that he's a dick, so there's no question of that either. But he's outstanding with children. And there was a special needs
Mm,
guy that was behind us in line, and he was fully dressed up, and it was his third time coming to see um, uh, William Shatner that weekend. He had been there. This was like on
mm,
he had come and seen him and done photo ops and things like that, and he spent his time with this, yeah, he was probably like a young adult, maybe early late 20s, and William Shatner spent an immense amount of time just patiently listening and just being very obliging, really respectful to him, and at the same time able to calmly, direct him a little bit and get the photo done and still build really good rapport, genuine rapport, and he's very patient. And I'm like, that's what I want. That's what I remember of him. Like, as far as like the next time, opportunity knocks and I'll be able to see him again, that'll be, no matter
Yeah.
what, that'll be my first impressions of him, is how kind he was. And, my middle son has autism severe. And there's not a lot of patient people in the world, and there's a lot of judgment. And, it's not easy being different. And
Mm,
I think,
of
that
course.
was very
Yeah.
touching to me as, as a parent. I was like, oh, thank you for being a good person to this. I don't care if you treat me like shit because I can handle it, like,
Yeah.
but it's for people who process the world differently that it's a lot more complicated. And when they idolize you, or the fun and the fantasy and the excitement and the futuristic aspects to a TV show that's going to last for generations, God willing, hopefully nobody else burns it down,
Yeah.
is that it will bring people together, and it brings everybody together. So when you go to any kind of conference or con and you have other people who are Star Trek fans, I talked to so many people online. It was so much fun, you know, and everyone was kind and very it's like a family. That's what I found out.
Yeah. Definitely.
Every time I go, I find something new. Like, and it's like a family. And they treated
Definitely.
this young man who
But
was very quirky.
yeah.
He was embraced, and I thought it was outstanding. I was like, thank God for good people.
Well, I had the opportunity to meet James Doohan in the 90s. This is
Oh,
in 96, I think, 96 or 97. This was in Manchester. There was a convention. And when I went to go get a photograph signed, I noticed that he had a finger missing. And I
mm.
thought, do I ask him? Should I ask him? I thought better not. And he saw me look at his finger. He said, I lost that finger on D-Day. He said, you were in D-Day? He went, yeah. He was in the artillery.
Yeah.
He was in the Canadian forces. And he landed, I can't remember what beach he landed on. I think it was Omaha, Utah, maybe, one of them.
Might have been
Um,
Omaha.
yeah, Omaha. Anyway, yeah, he said he got shows. I said, well, how come we never saw that show? He said there was a special prosthetic
Mm-hmm.
that they had made for him, and there was a little, they just fix it on. And so it looked like he had, he could still move his other fingers, so nobody would notice
Right.
that this one finger wasn't real. And it was like, wow, that's so cool. Yeah, that's
And
really cool.
and
He's a really nice guy as
yeah,
well. He
I was gonna
was,
say he has. I had a friend of mine that met him. Obviously he's passed on, but
mm,
very much a gentleman and very kind and down
yeah,
to earth
definitely.
and really respectful of fans. And fans just immediately sent him love and respect. And it was just, I love the fact that that's what the community has done, is embraced, every single person, from that show, because of it's a love. They knew, well, remember back, and this is a long time ago, how people used to treat Trekkies like, oh, you're all a bunch of geeks, and you probably go and like you have like the Starship Enterprise as your living room, and you're this, and it was very ostracized, and we're the nerds, and
Yeah,
now
definitely. But
it's so
with,
much.
yeah,
They had their own communities, and there was a family then, and it was, everyone in the Star Trek
mm.
community just, they loved this fandom, and it was such a. It's very different. I would say it's changed in
Well,
some ways, but it's still there. I feel
it
very
has.
strongly.
Yeah, I think what happened was the growing fandom for it, you
It.
know,
Mhm.
made it cool. Because when people start realizing this is, you know, there are these people who go out, wear the uniform, spend lots of money, and have a good time, and then they think that actually sounds like a really good idea. And now you see everybody doing it. You've got Marvel doing it, DC, Star Wars as well. They do it, and it's just something that's grown up now throughout all the franchises. But I mean, yeah, there was this sort of stigma to being a Trekkie,
Mhm.
but you know, it wasn't. I don't think it was as bad as it was in the previous, as it was perhaps in the previous decades. Where, for instance, I remember watching shows from the '80s or the '70s where you weren't just a geek or a nerd because you liked something. Nerds and geeks dressed like nerds and geeks. They had the big the milk bottle glasses and a calculator in the shirt pocket with pens sticking out,
Right.
and
Mm-hmm.
they would actually talk nerdy and sort of hunched over and walk nerdy as well. You um, sort of
Yeah.
in a way that people would pick on them. But in the 90s, that was a bit different. I mean, you know, nobody really could tell if you were a nerd because you just had to do your hair a certain way and
Right.
speak a certain way, and
Mm-hmm.
you could pass for normal.
Mm-hmm. It's
But
true.
yeah,
And it's like when it came to the like fandoms or different interests and stuff like that. Uh, I remember in my group of friends that I didn't know anybody else that was, like, example, a gamer, or I didn't, not even then.
mm,
And most of the females I knew were not even the least bit interested in, like, because I liked a lot of
yeah,
adventure novels. I liked fantasy, and I was a huge Star Wars fan. I was getting into more Star Trek and things like that, and they were just like not even interested. And I didn't dress like a geek, but I know that just that common interest was like a turnoff for some of my friends. Are like, ah, I'm like, I'm not really interested in that. I'm like, okay, so trying to find like-minded individuals was hard for a little bit, when I was going through school. And now it's like a dime a dozen. Everybody's a fan of whatever that is. And I was, collecting Marvel cards and figurines and things like that. And I was a huge X Files fan, and got an opportunity to go to one of their conferences. And I had so much fun with like-minded people, fandoms. I was like, this is amazing, and 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 I loved it. I loved meeting people that were in the same interests, but at the same time, some really interesting characters I probably would never have met had we not met. You know what I mean? There.
yeah.
you know.
Well, I mean, conventions weren't, I think, when you went to a specific convention, they weren't as big and fantastic as they are now.
Right.
I mean, we went in our own made costumes. We made our own uniforms, or we had a grandmother or mother who would sit behind a sewing machine and make the shirt or the pair of pants, whatever, to go with it.
Right.
You build your own accessories like a phaser, tricorder, things like that. One of the interesting things though was when you everyone would sort of congregate, in this big hall everywhere, and the arguments I would hear people have was absolutely hilarious.
yeah.
We're talking about, for instance, the warp scales, because in the original series they were able to go up to at one point they went up to warp 20, you know, and or warp 13 up to warp 20. But in then the newer shows, the next generation, warp 9.999 was the fastest you could go. The warp 10 barrier can never be broken and all that. Sorry, I'm talking geeky technical stuff now.
Right.
So they'd argue, no, it's this way, it's this way, it's this way,
But
and then years later, someone actually solved it, and this is why it changed. But you hit like one guy. I met one guy. He was adamant, absolutely adamant, that only what Gene Roddenberry wrote is Star Trek. Everything else that was written by anyone else is not real Star Trek. You know, and you got some guys who are really sort of strict and made up their own rules and then
yeah.
try and sort of push it onto other fans.
Yeah.
And then you've got guys who are a bit more relaxed, But I suppose it's no different than sports fans. I mean, you've got your
Yeah.
hardcore sports fans who know all the statistics, um, ages, the names, and where all the players come from, and how much they're worth when they got sold or whatever else, or what who they reckon what team is going to win is going to win the next championship and all that. And they never understood these. I mean, because my father was a big it still is now a big Man United fan. He always has been,
Mhm.
and he's always asking me, "Why is it you don't watch football like a normal person? Why can't you support Man United? Why do you want to watch Star Trek?" And they went, "Well, why can't you be more normal like me? Why can't you be more like me and watch Star Trek?" Because he said, "Because it's on everywhere. It's on all the bloody time." He said, "Well, so is football."
right.
And he
Right.
said, "I mean, you look at me." He said, "You wear these uniforms and everything." He said, "You wear a football shirt." He said, "It's not the same thing. It's not the same thing."
well,
Yeah.
and that's the truth, though. I mean, it's like,
Mm,
I've met quite a few really like die hard, like when you're saying those nerdy details where they're arguing over
mm,
just the most minuscule things, and I'm like, okay, and I'm more nonchalant. Like, I don't.
Yeah.
I don't get too worried about that. I don't get hung up on a lot of details. As long as, let's say it's about a specific canon example or,
Mm.
timelines, which that's more of like my concerns, but as opposed to little minor details, I don't get psychotic about. But I've listened to plenty of those nerdy conversations, and I go,
Yeah.
oh my. Like, because I'm like, someone's going to be thrown down because they get very heated. And I'm like, this is so entertaining. This is sports. And it is sports. It's that same, no, that call was wrong. It's the same thing. But yeah,
Yeah.
it's funny how each fandom has that spin to it, though. Like, everyone, just like how people like pick apart Star Wars and, Marvel. And
Definitely.
it's
Yeah.
the same thing. And that's how, honestly, that's how nerds are. And I'm like, so when people do voice their displeasure with something because it's been changed for some other reason that is not related to this series, but it's more or less like, let's say, personal agenda or political. That's why you have so many of the nerds coming out and saying, well, what are you doing? You're like, you're completely ruining it. And like, to me, I'm like, you guys should, you're messing with these prior, not so popular, in my opinion, in the sense of so many people being so interested in having that span of interest as it used to. Because Star
Mm.
Trek was like the same thing as Star Wars. It was like this bracket of fans. Now we have a more broader
Yeah.
brush of
Definitely.
fans. So you're just hearing, because it's getting more exposure, because there's more films being made or remakes being made, you're going to get heat because you're talking to dedicated, diehard fans of all different ages. You know, I'm not
Definitely.
surprised
Yeah.
by that. But
Mm.
I am looking forward to the Picard series. I,
Mm.
I at first I was like, okay, taking a step back, I'm like, okay, we'll see how this goes. But I am looking forward to it. I'm going to give it a chance and see how it goes and see where
Definitely.
the story runs with. It does look like it's going to do
Me
well.
too. Me too. I mean, I've thrown out like I don't know, about 10, 12 different theories on where this could go. I mean, the series I'm doing now, the humanities trial, is sort of leading up that way, bit by bit,
Yeah,
because I'm trying to sort of build a map. Now, I might be completely wrong where I'm going with this series, but I'm taking my time doing doing these videos, mostly because I want to get it right. I want my theories to be right. You
right.
know, every Trek channel worth their salt is throwing out theories. But yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to the Picard series. I, I do think it's cut maybe the title. They could have called it something else, Star Trek. I don't know, Endeavor or something. I don't know, something
Right.
that gives it a bit more than just the name Picard, because it does make it sound sort of like it's just you know something that just spun out to keep the fans happy while they're working on something else.
Yeah, I
But
agree.
uh,
But
but
also
it does look
too,
interesting.
I think it pigeonholes that show a little bit too, because if you did Star Trek, let's say Endeavor, which I think would be
Uh,
great, it would fall into line in my mind a lot more clear because then you have a broader, like once again, a broader brush to paint with as opposed to
yeah.
pigeonholed just on Picard or a series surrounding Picard because what if something
Mm,
changes, God forbid, and
yeah.
then you have to do some
Well,
quick writing, you know.
definitely. Well, Nick Kepolsky, because he's got a great Trek channel as well. He's essentially broke it down to Picard pretty much is going to end up being a greatest hits show. So everything that made the TNG era great, i.e., Next Generation, DS9, and Voyager, everything that was great about those shows is going to get thrown into this. Seven and Nine, the Borg, Picard,
Right.
Romulans, Klingons, everything else. You know, and all that. So that's essentially, I think, what Picard is going to be.
Okay.
While I think I don't see Picard maybe doing more than 2 seasons. I think they're throwing Picard out at the moment to help build up what may very likely be a Pike show.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
because the because in every convention so far, Alex Kurtzman's been teasing.
Right.
Do you want a Pike show? Yeah, we do. All right, we'll think about it. And then the next convention, we'll do the same thing, and so on and so on. And now we're coming up to the third short track, where for it's the third episode where you will see a TOS character. The last two we had Pike, and in the first one we had number one and Spock. So now we're going to get another one with Pike. Now with all these sets being built, and obviously they're keeping the characters going. I'm
Mm-hmm.
guessing this is a tease. They want to tease us that
Mm-hmm.
yeah, let's throw that out, see how the fans like it, and if
Exactly.
they want, and if it turns out well, we'll greenlight a show, and yeah,
Yeah.
so
They always they have a tendency to throw out those breadcrumbs just to see who's going to bite, who might,
yeah,
what is the critical, feedback, what is the positive feedback, and what outweighs the other. I'm okay
yeah,
with that to some extent, especially when it's, leaks in quotes. Um,
definitely.
because that way it can be adjusted, and I'm okay with it. But it's a little game they
Mm,
play, the studios play with whatever they're doing. But yeah, I do look forward to that. And I how did you feel? And I'm just asking this specifically for the audience too. Is
mm.
how did you feel about the newer remakes of Star Trek that they had done with
Right,
that?
Discovery.
No, the actual films,
Um,
the films, because Discovery is a whole nother
oh,
subject.
the
Yeah.
2009.
Mhm.
Uh, Well, I didn't mind the first one. I mean, okay, we took it for what it was. It was a summer movie.
Yeah.
There's only so much story you can tell in an hour and a half in 90 minutes.
Right.
So yeah, it's also got new actors in it playing all characters. So expecting them to be William Shatner or be Leonard Nimoy, would I think is too high of a bar to set. I
Right.
think all you can ask from these actors is just to respect the characters and do a good job in the movie. And I think they did,
Mhm.
especially Zachary Quinto.
Oh
You know,
yeah.
he did a great job, and Carl Urban
Yeah.
as Owen McCoy,
Yeah.
brilliant, absolutely brilliant. And also, I think because it was a movie and not a TV show, I think it was a little bit that could be a little bit relaxed in a way.
Yeah.
For instance, there was when you saw Kirk and Bones meet, and he sits down and says, "Why are you joining Starfleet?" So, well, what choice have I got? My third wife took everything in the divorce. All I've
Yeah.
got left is my bones. you
Right.
know,
And
and I thought that was a great. I mean, that's not why originally he was called Bones, but I thought that was a great. Why not use that? It was actually funny.
yes, it was well written. I enjoyed
Mm,
that. I'll be honest with you. I enjoyed the first and the second movie. The third,
yeah,
the Beyond. I don't know. Like I felt I don't know lost opportunities
Beyond,
there.
yeah.
And I know Simon tried to write as well as he could. To try to appease, but it just felt
Mm.
very it was
Well,
very good characters, I'd say, very good story,
mm,
but there was a lot of stuff that it just seemed a little, I don't know, it seemed emptier, and I don't know what was missing.
yeah, it is. There was one bit though where they had, I can't remember his name now. The black guy who was almost the next James Bond.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Um,
Um,
I can't remember his name
I'm a
now.
terrible person, but yes, I know who you're talking about.
Yeah, but anyway, he played he played the antagonist in the movie,
yes.
and the bit where he was bringing up, throwing a bit of lore and history in there, that you
Mhm.
know originally he was a Mako, they're like Starfleet's commandos, and then they got disbanded, and they were just sort of
Yeah.
given a few ships, and saying like, went from having enemies to these enemies now being our friends, and I was supposed to just, take it and sit with them, and then you make peace with them and this lot, and then we go missing, and you just leave us behind. No one came looking for us, and he's sort of angry and bitter, and I thought that was a good
That
story.
was
It
good.
was a good idea.
That was really, and I liked the way they found the footage and they were watching it, and it was just like that was a great moment. I think that
Mm,
whole his whole like that little mini monologue where he's explaining all this stuff to whoever finds the footage, and
yeah.
it was I really enjoyed that. I was like, oh, it kind of caught me off guard, and it was a nice tie-in. Like to
Mm.
me, I was like, all right, cool. Like, and it wasn't. There was thought put into it. There was just. I think that it's almost like somebody at the studio just went, "I'm gonna edit the hell out of this movie,"
Yeah.
and they were just like, "We don't
Yeah.
need this. We don't need that." I feel like that's kind of
No.
what happened somewhere, and
But,
I'd love to see more uncut films.
yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Especially for
I mean,
Star Trek.
definitely. The only thing that ruined that particular movie for me was at the end when on that where they fixed that other spaceship, the USS Franklin, and then they beat the enemy with rock and roll music, and you're like,
Yeah, I don't need to hear sabotage anymore in my life. It's
mm,
cool. Like I appreciate the Beastie Boys, just not in that moment. Yeah.
no, yeah, definitely. But yeah, but there was always a question though, back then, what music do people in Starfleet listen to? Because obviously, I don't know, maybe because obviously in the real world, whether a copyright issue or something, they couldn't, get this music in the shows. But I always wondered, you rarely ever heard them listen to music or something. They're always on the
Yeah.
holodeck, that thing that always broke down or something went wrong with the holodeck,
And if
which
you
was
did hear any music, it was usually classical because of
mm,
Picard, or other
definitely.
characters. And that was the only time I recall like really hearing any modern quote, our
Mm,
era type music. And I was like, oh, but that seems suiting for him because he was such a historical minded person that made sense for his character to be listening to classical music. And I was like,
mm.
because his brain was already there. He was what do you call it? Nostalgic in essence. Um,
Yeah, maybe. Yeah,
and it had that feeling
could be.
to
Yeah.
him, But yeah, I mean, but that music thing, I was like, why are they playing this crap? Like, I just that's the point where I was like, I feel like this is a movie where we're gonna need explosions, and oh look, explosions,
Yeah,
yeah. But I mean, I know that's Simon Pegg's selection of music there, but
definitely.
it is what it is, and but I enjoyed the films. I was, I had my moments. Into Darkness was really good. I was really surprised, for me.
Yeah,
I went in with I'm not trying to be a jerk, but I went in with pretty much like, okay, this is going to be a boring popcorn flick. Sequels sometimes can let you
yeah.
down, and it wasn't. I think it
But
was pretty
it had
good.
its high points and it
It
had its
did.
low points.
Yeah.
I mean, when you had a character I mean, they already brought old characters back like Kirk and Spock and that, but
Mhm.
having him Cumberbatch play Khan Noonien Singh, who was obviously sort of Indian, maybe
Yeah.
in descent. That he was this guy who he just didn't get the same gravitas as Carlos Montalban did.
Yes.
So I'm stuttering here.
Ricardo Montalban, I think.
Ricardo, sorry, not Carlos. Ricardo Montalban. Sorry,
It's okay.
I should know that. I don't know why I say Carlos. I don't know. Okay,
It
anyway,
sounded
Ricardo
better.
Montalban.
You're like, this is brother.
Oh, I was watching Carlos Mencia earlier. So
Oh, see, there
yeah,
you go.
yeah. Sorry,
Yeah.
Ricardo Montalban. But yeah, he brought that character to Gravitas, and Cumberbatch is somewhat some more. I don't know. He played it very flat. There was no sort of oomph to
Yeah.
him.
There,
Anyway,
he
he was.
played it like kind of like Alan Rickman would play it. Like he was talking like
Yes,
that's kind of my
Alan
impression.
Rickman.
It was like listening to Alan.
Absolutely.
That's how it felt.
Yeah,
And he did. I think. I agree with that because I was disappointed a little bit, but I wasn't completely let down by it in the end. I was like, okay, I can handle this because if they recast him and whenever they decide to, if they are at any point ever, I'm gonna do a part, let's say 4 to this, revival of
definitely.
because everyone's getting older now. TikTok Hollywood, um, move forward. Uh, if they do decide to bring him back, they could easily, because of like how he can change in appearance, that character supposedly. Okay,
Yeah,
they can go ahead. They have a little leeway to cast someone new that would be more suiting and carry that gravitas that's necessary. I think they just went after the easy kill for casting because they knew all the, what do they call them, cumber bitches or whatever they call themselves.
Cumberbatch.
Yeah, well, no,
Oh, come
the
on, bitches.
girls, no, yeah, the
The
girls,
groupies. Yeah,
yes, and I think that's why they did it because they were like, we need some of them bitches. That's kind of what our impression was. So I was like, that's why he's there.
yeah,
I mean, that's not to take away
yeah.
from his acting,
Maybe.
but that's how I felt. I was like,
Well, I
mm,
mean, imagine the same was probably with Ricardo Montalban
oh
actually,
yeah,
because he was already famous
yeah,
then, before Star Trek, and I would imagine he had sort of say a strong female following.
oh yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. He was like a that Latin lover type thing, and
yeah,
yeah, but he did such a good job in that role, and I
definitely,
loved his character, and that was the thing is those films they stand to me they still stand up to time. Like I can still watch all of them
absolutely.
in a row and be entertained just like I was the first time I watched them, and um that's one thing I noticed. Like, when I went back and rewatched, I tried to watch Beyond again, and I couldn't do it. Um, I was like, nah, disappointed. It was just that there was just
Yeah,
something missing. But as far as the others, I was able to rewatch them and have an enjoyable time. And that's the point of a Star Trek film is, you know, having that a little bit of that nostalgia, but at the same time having, kind of having the door open a little bit. Where it's like you get a different
definitely.
perspective on those, particular characters that point in their lives, being younger especially, and yeah, it's always interesting. It's like I enjoyed them. I guess I like the casting overall. I think Carl Urban. Yeah, I am a Carl Urban, fan. I don't care. I'll fangirl about him any
I
day.
like Carl Weathers.
Yeah,
Well, he's just some good characters,
yeah,
especially in Dredd. I think he
yeah.
did a great Judge Dredd.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he did. I was pretty surprised actually. I was like, I know he really wanted to do that role. Like that, he really wanted that
Mm.
role. And so, because he had been like trying to like he put it out there for many years, and he got the role, and he was very excited. But he did such a great job in it. I was like, well, that's nice to see that instead of that other Judge Dredd crap we had from what was his name, Sylvester Stallone? Was that?
Yeah.
Nah. I'm like, no, thank
The
you.
problem the problem with this Stallone movie was they won. Well, I think the big one was they had him remove the helmet. Right,
Yes.
the Dredd. Every time in the comics, if Dredd did remove the helmet, you only ever saw him from behind, or
Right.
you literally just saw his, or him literally just putting the helmet back on. So you maybe just caught the tip of his nose or something in the comics. But you never ever saw his face. I didn't
Correct.
mind the story too much between him and Rico because that was actually his origin story that him and Rico were clones and everything else. But I think if they did it more gritty like rather than trying to make it a comic book movie, but actually try to make a proper movie out of it, then it probably would have had more success. And as well as him not removing his helmet, it probably would have had a lot more success.
Right.
But movies, I remember that time, at least in that time period in the 90s, movies were getting churned out left, right, and center, especially with Stallone. I mean, he did Demolition Man,
Oh
and straight
yeah.
from Demolition Man, then to Judge Dredd. You
Yep.
know, so the action movies were getting pumped out, and
Y-
Arnie, of course, was
mhm.
still making them as well. Like I think at that time it was True Lies, and
Yes.
he did another one. Can't remember what.
Uh,
So yeah,
yeah. I love True Lies. That's one of my favorite action films. Was True Lies. Like, I
yeah,
I enjoyed that. But yeah, as far as with Stallone, it's like he was overly saturated in that time. Remember when Judge Dredd came out? It didn't perform as well as they had
no,
wanted it to, and
definitely,
it definitely didn't do what they expected. Because Demolition Man was like it blew everything out of the water to some extent based on all the marketing, and it
yeah.
worked. It just worked. But
Mm,
it was those films. I still go back and I'll rewatch them. Like because they're fun to watch, and that's the
mm,
unfortunate part. There's not very many current films for me that I'll sit through and be like, oh, this is fun to watch.
yeah.
It doesn't feel the
Well,
same.
Well, they had a few sort of action comics sort of trying to get pushed out into movies. I mean, another one was with Van Damme around about the same time as well, called Time Cop.
Oh
You know, that
yeah,
originally started off as a comic.
yeah,
I mean, I actually never heard of it until the movie came out. You know, that's the first time I've heard of it.
right.
And then there used to be a magazine for boys back in the 90s in the UK because girls had smash hits and Girl Weekly in it or anything else. We boys only had one magazine that was for boys and it was called Looking. Um, so look in, so you open up, you look in, obviously,
Right.
and it had everything from movie reviews to upcoming TV shows and everything. It was just for boys. Girls had like three, four, five, six different magazines for
Uh
them. We
huh.
just had the one. And unfortunately, somewhere in the mid '90s, then that disappeared. They just stopped making looking, unfortunately. But yeah, that would always tell you about the upcoming stuff. And I remember reading an article about this new movie Time Cop with Van Damme coming out, and it was based on a comic book that almost no one ever heard. I don't think anyone ever heard of at the time. And then also, so you had Time Cop, Demolition Man started off as a comic as well, and then Judge Dredd. So there's a whole slew of them getting made, as well as video games. I mean, you had like Street Fighter, Mortal Kombat,
Yep.
So yeah, there was this big push to try and get comics and movies based on games and comics pushed out to the forefront. Unfortunately, it just wasn't hitting anything.
Yeah, I think they were just like you were saying, they're just pumping them out way just too quickly, overly
Mm,
saturating the market, and then
definitely.
there was just it didn't have the same feeling to it. I will say this, I'm glad that the films that I have seen it, like let's say more recent, let's say in the last, let's go for 15, 20 years, um, like Sin City, well done.
Great film.
It was really well
Yeah.
done, and it matched the comic book because I had the graphic novel rather, and I loved it. I was like, this is great. And V for Vendetta, I enjoyed it. Obviously, it was as close as
Mm,
I would have wanted. If I went in like going, okay, we'll see what happens. But when I got to see it in full, and I'd already read the graphic novel and all these things, I was very excited for that. Just like The Crow and things like that. Um, they're
definitely.
underappreciated in its own way, but yet they have a cult status to them because they stayed closer to, I would say, the source material, and they didn't stray too
Yeah.
far like a lot of those films that came out in the '90s. Were just like, here's Judge
Mm,
Dredd. Like nobody gives a damn. Like they're like,
yeah.
this isn't the Judge Dredd
Yeah.
we ordered. And then it's like I don't know if
Definitely.
he must have had
Yeah.
it in his contract. He's like, I must show my face. Um,
Yeah.
it
The
just
screen time. Well, it's the same with was it because one thing I see like other channels like Geeks and Gamers and all that because sometimes I take a peek in it. One of them, I can't remember which channel it was, brought up a good point about Kylo Ren that he, they think that probably the movies might have a bigger reception if the Kylo didn't remove his helmet.
yeah.
You
And
because he looks fierce with the helmet on. He's got
oh yeah.
a slightly sort of scary voice when he's got it on as well. But what ruins it as well is when he takes his helmet off.
Yep.
And it was one of the things I had to agree with. I think because I mean, until the end of Return of the Jedi, nobody knew what Darth Vader looked like. Nobody cared.
Correct.
He was a
Right.
badass, And it's one of those things. I think maybe it's obviously a contractual thing that when you get the movie, you have to have a certain amount of screen time.
Yep.
Maybe the pay is dependent on screen time and not just the lines being spoken.
And that
Yeah,
kind of sucks because it's like it took away from the story. I know that when they did that face reveal, I mean, we were in the
yeah,
audience and the reaction, it was laughter.
mm,
When he took his mask off, and I was like, oh no, and like I went with the eldest because that's our thing is Star Wars, and he's like, why'd they do
mm.
that? I'm like, someone's getting paid, and it did ruined the
yeah,
story. And I was like, well, okay. I mean, I was still on board for the second. I went into the second, but honestly, as optimistic as one could
mm,
be, and I was not happy when we left, and I was very disappointed. And I felt like I felt I could see JJ's influence. I will give JJ Abrams credit. I know a lot of people have like a love hate thing with him, and for me, I give him credit because I do feel like he does try his best to bring what he can of the nostalgia to it, but yet make it his own in his own way, and still be respectful as much,
mm.
to greater extent to the fan base. At least he's more willing to listen. But I know not a lot of people care for Jar Jar. I'm sorry,
Mm.
but
No,
I
of course
like
not.
him. I'm okay with it because I see what he's done, and I saw what he did with the first Star Trek and the second.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
I see the
Well,
influence. You know.
the one thing I do like about the sequel trilogy is it looks visually now
Mhm.
and tonally, it looks a lot more in line with the original trilogy, where the prequel trilogy had a whole different look to it. Yeah, I mean, I understand it's before the days of the Empire and everything else, but when I think of Star Wars, I think these great big hulking, you the constructions like the Death Star. You go in there, you got computers up at the top of the wall, blinking lights and everything. You're
Yeah.
wondering why they're there, but they've got no business, but nobody cares. Where it was big and clunky and horrible.
Yeah.
Where obviously before that, everything was more sort of pristine and sleek, and and so it had this very different look
Mhm.
in the prequel trilogy than it did in the original trilogy. Where the sequel trilogy now it does look more in line with the Star Wars aesthetic visually.
Yeah. The original series. The original series had this coldness to it, and it was made up.
Yeah,
Obviously, it was for unreasoned purposes to get that feeling of a foreign or alien surroundings and being uncomfortable. And it did really well at doing that,
Mm.
especially when you're on board the Death Star or in different locations. You visually did feel that emotion where you're like, oh, well, this is not a welcoming place. This is a place we don't belong.
No,
Um,
absolutely.
and now you see, and I
Yeah,
agree. So when you see the new ones, you do have that a little bit, but it feels much more polished than that rough rock it used to be. I think there's good and bad with that. I think with Rogue One, they did a fantastic job with that.
good job.
It was really well done, and I went into it once again half cocked. I was like, but it was well done. It was written well done. I love the characters. I enjoyed even the minor roles, the smaller roles.
Definitely.
I think they did a great job, introducing those characters and making you relate to them in a sense of like a personal, you feel like an affinity with them, or they're likable. Even if they're jerks, you're like, I like them, they're cool, you know.
Yeah,
But there was very well done, and as far as cosmetically, it was very Star Wars, but yet it had that feeling of the older films where it felt very um, uncomfortable in many sections of it, but yet again, it was still polished. It looked well done. I was like, oh, it was so much. That's the Star Wars I was looking for. I have not sat down and watched The Mandarin yet, so
definitely.
I have no clue.
Yeah,
I can't speak on it yet, but I heard it's doing well, meaning it's well done. I'm like, well, checks in the mail. We'll see how it looks.
yeah,
You
definitely.
know.
It just look cool, and I think maybe that's where they want to hit. Because I remember in the again back in the '90s, and we got our first proper PC, with the internet capability and everything else, and there's CD-ROM in it, because the computer we had before that was an Amiga 500. It used the old 3.5 floppies,
Yeah.
and they go cronk cronk, and
Right.
8-bit graphics, and well, 16-bit graphics, sorry, but most of the games were still in 8-bit,
Right.
unfortunately. Um, but there was this game called Dark Forces 2 Jedi Knight, and it wasn't just a game you just
Yeah.
played. It was the first game where you could actually. It was a three-dimensional game. It was a POV game,
Mhm.
and you got to hold the lightsaber. You had to make. It's sort of think of it like a bit like Doom, but
Yeah.
with lightsabers. But it was more to it. You could interact with the characters, and your choices decided will you be a Jedi, or will you be a Sith?
Right.
And it goes into lots of lore about the Sith and everything. That's when I started learning first of all a bit more about Star Wars.
I
And
think that's well done. I think that I know I played this game before,
and
and I
that
thought it was perfect RPG. I think
mm,
having that choose your own adventure aspect to it, and being able to kind of you see the dark and the light build. So you're seeing yourself making
yeah,
decisions,
definitely,
and you're like, wait a minute, there was no right answer for that question. Sometimes there's, like there would be
yeah,
like a decision, and you notice that you go up on both sides. And you're like, whoa, okay, I
mm,
didn't realize, I didn't know that could happen. But I think that game was ahead of its time in that
yeah.
sense for at least Star Wars games, because I know that for a while there it was just kind of side scrollers
Mm.
and
But the
you know
Yeah, but the story that was involved with it there was essentially this is after Return of the Jedi, but there are still there's still the sort of what's left of the Empire, and there are these Sith controlling it now, and
hmm
there's about six of them. So, and each of these Sith, each of these Sith is like the boss at the end of a level, and the mission you have to go on is you have to find these maps and holocrons and everything else, and you have to make your way to a place called the Lost Valley of the Jedi. And whoever sits in the middle will gain all the power of the Force, and you'll be then to control the universe. And it didn't have Luke Skywalker in it. It had none of the other characters,
hmm
and it just told its own story. And I think if they hadn't, when it comes to the sequel trilogy, if they hadn't put any of the older characters in there, they might have had, should we say, a better, perhaps um, a better reception. It was a whole new story, whole new adventure, um, and these are new characters. They're completely different to the old ones. I, I think you probably would have had a better reception with
right.
those movies. You know,
Yep. And I think when it comes to all these different fandoms and how over time they kind of they develop and they do change, and I'm okay with that. Like I'm okay if like things start to develop, maybe they actually take a piece of older canon that there was only maybe a section of,
Mm.
and then build out of that. And you can go in any direction after that, really. I mean, it's just getting through that initial one piece. It's kind of like that's what Rogue One I think did, was take that one, comment about the sacrifice that these individuals made for, this rebellion, and then made it into a whole, story, bringing new characters, but also insight into, how many people did risk their lives to, for freedom and basically to get after the empire. But I like that kind of stuff. I think that that's kind of one of the things that they should take a better look at and have people who understand the canon a little bit better, just so they don't
Definitely.
like exploit it or get too decorative and things like that. I do want to start wrapping up a little bit with you, but
Of course, yeah.
I have a series of questions for you. And
Sure.
Stig had on his one-on-one we did together, he had requested, oh, can we do the Pivot questionnaire, which is inside the actor studio. I don't know if you're familiar with that show, but the end of the
No.
it's a television show here. They played in the States, but it was hosted by
Okay.
James Limpton, and they would bring on different actors and directors and whoever, and they would do Q&A at the end of this very long talk, and it was for thespians, basically people who are going to school to be actors or inspiring directors or
Oh,
whatever.
okay. Yeah.
And so it's a great show. I highly recommend looking it up on YouTube because you can find a lot of episodes with
Yeah,
all
would it? Yeah.
different actors and so on. But anyway, at the end of the show, he does like this. It is a 10 question 10 questions, and it came from the Bouillon de Culture by Bernard Pivot. And Bernard Pivot has these 10
I'll do my
questions,
best.
and I think it'll be fun. So the first question is, what is your favorite word?
Favorite word?
Mm-hmm.
Hmm. That's a good one, actually. Well, for a long time, well, so it's two words, but cut away,
Mm.
and it's something when you ended up in trouble in the army and you were brought in front of either your troop commander or the sergeant major, you know, once they'd lost their rag with you, they, you know, you'd obviously come to attention, salute him, and he'd scream, "Cut away!" Yeah, and cut away.
You're
And you
like,
literally that means get the fuck up my office fast. You march at the speed of 1,000 gazelles and get out. And that's a term that's always stuck with me, and I still use it today. Cut away. Yeah,
it's like a nice, it's a perfect word for so many things. You can use it for
yeah.
so many things. The phrase rather, but yeah. So then, in turn, then, what is your least favorite word?
Lush,
Lush.
lush, Lush. It is a
Yeah.
horrible, horrible word. You girl, because mainly girls used to use it because that tastes so lush and that
Oh.
tastes or he's so lush. We go, especially when I was a teenager, the girls go mad for some celebrity with abs on top of his abs and
Oh
everything
yeah.
else.
That's
And
that context. See, the only time I use the word lush is if
yeah,
I'm describing somebody who's an alcoholic or something who can't handle their liquor, like somebody like that. Like, oh, that's the only time
yeah,
I've used that, but I know what you're talking about because I've heard girls go, "Oh, it's such lush." I'm like, "Ooh, it does sound bad."
yeah. I mean, I know most women don't like the word moist,
Oh, yeah.
and for
Yeah.
me, it's like that lush. It's like,
Oh, that's
yeah.
pretty good. I never thought of it like that because I'm so used to using it about people who drink too much. I'm like, oh, he's a lush. But okay,
Yeah.
so what? Okay, this is the full question. I started to see this the other day to someone. They're like, "What?" I'm like, "Let me finish the question."
Yeah.
Okay, what turns you on creatively, spiritually, or emotionally?
Turns me on. Oh, well, creatively, for instance, when I'm doing my video, if say I'm on the road driving or something,
Mm.
and something about Star Trek will pop in my head, and it's like that would make a great video. And there's been a whole bunch of videos that I wanted to make, but either I couldn't get the footage for it,
Right.
or I've just not had the time to finish it. I've got one on the way, which is at the moment this what if Cisco was in first contact. I've just not had the time to finish that yet. It's about halfway through. But yeah, literally, creatively, I just something will pop in there and they go, I want to do it. And I'll spend at least a good week trying to make it. And if in a week I'm not making any progress, I'll shelve it and come back to it later. Spiritually, sometimes if I don't know, something will occur to me or see something, I mean, when I talk about spiritually now, I'm not talking about God or anything like that,
Mm-hmm.
but it was when I was at, where was it? When I was in the army, I had this friend of mine. Now, a lot of people didn't like him because he was a bit of a tit, especially when he was drunk. But
Right.
he was one of those guys who could just, nobody would tell him he couldn't do it. He was 5 foot nothing. It was a bloke from Newcastle, YR lad, and he we went on an exercise in UK called a place called Senny Bridge. It's in Wales,
Okay.
and it has the most god awful weather system. Anyway, the I was supposed to be the casualty, okay, and
Right.
with all my gear on, that was my weapon. That's with all my utility belt and all that. My pack, all together with me and all that stuff on. I must have weighed all together. It must have weighed about 70 kilos.
Good
Him
lord.
with all his gear on, helmet, body armor, webbing, all that stuff on, was to throw me over his shoulder or do a fireman carry
Mm-hmm.
and run me up the hill.
Oh god.
And fuck me, he did it. He did it with me. He's 5 foot nothing. I'm 5'9" with all my gear on. Both got all the gear on. This is on the last day. We're pissed wet, absolutely soaking wet through, which made, of course, everything heavier. And he just got me up and he just wouldn't stop. And I thought, so when it comes to when people ask me things about spirituality, I talk about, inner, your inner spirituality. Not, I don't really follow any faith, but when I see someone who, when someone said, I bet you can't do that, or someone said, he'd never be able to do that, and then you see them do it, that for
Yeah.
me is like the greatest spiritual turn on, should we say. What was the other one?
And the last one is emotionally.
Emotional turn on.
Mm-hmm.
A nice smile. I think especially if it's a woman, see a woman have a nice smile.
Right.
Yeah, yeah, it's all because then it makes me smile. It's one of those things that's contagious, I
Right.
suppose. If people are happy, just an atmosphere will build from it, and you just sort of everyone wants to get into sync with that.
Yeah.
And everyone it is contagious. It's the same with depression or say a bad mood. It's contagious. You see one guy in a bad mood, especially someone you knew, then you're in a bad mood, then all your friends are in a bad mood, and so on, so on it goes.
Right.
But luckily, moods change. So yeah. But for me, it's a pretty smile, especially from a woman.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay. So then the next question is what turns you off? And that could be anything. What turns you off?
Um. What turns me off?
Yeah, it's one of those ones you
Bad
be
manners.
thinking.
Bad manners turn me off. People who don't care about anything. This sort
Mm,
of this I don't have the I don't care attitude.
the
I've met
apathy. Yeah.
I've met a lot of people who sort of they made a mistake or did something without thinking, and they don't care about the consequences. Maybe they do. They just don't want to face them,
Right.
but they just sort of leave. The consequences or the problems that they cause just linger. They don't even try to solve it, and they just walk on and go to the next place.
Yep.
And that's the biggest turn off for me.
Yep.
People like that. Yeah.
Okay. So then, what is your favorite curse word?
Thunder cunt. I've got a few.
uh,
Again, all the blue language that I learned in the army. Thunder
that's a
cunt.
popular one. I'm not gonna lie. Like, yeah.
What's the other one? Fuck knuckle. Um, Cunty bollocks. There's a few. God, it's too many. I guess I probably don't have a favorite. I probably got a top 10.
Yeah,
So
but yeah. So we'll take the first one because that is honestly
that'd be good.
the first one
Good.
the first one that pops out is usually that one because that's the go-to one. You're like, yeah, this one, and then you're like, but
Yeah.
wait a minute, there's so many others. But yeah. So the next question is, what sound or noise do you love?
Yeah. Hmm. there's when I visit my parents, they've got a massive garden, got a pool in there, and they also have a pond with this waterfall on it.
Mm,
You know, you build it from stones, and then they turn it on. It's electric, and then it sort of spits the water out. And especially in the summer, and it's about 5, 6 p.m. or 7 p.m. It's starting
mm-hmm.
to get a bit cooler, and you've had say maybe 2, 3 beers by now, and you're sort of relaxing. It
Yeah,
just really sort of mellows you out, and you're just enjoying that, the evening summer breeze, and it helps you really relax. That
yeah.
that waterfall noise,
Okay, so then what sound or noise do you hate?
Hmm. Well, no, I won't say that. I'll say something else. Uh,
You can say
was
whatever
I
you
hate?
want.
Well,
Yeah.
there's the shrill voice of my ex-wife when she's displeased with something, but I won't say that. Uh, I think there is one noise actually it gets on my tits, and it's when I hear a loud, uh, sorry, someone slam their car door really loudly, and the
Oh,
reason for that is because it almost sounds the same as an IDF impacting the ground.
oh,
Um,
okay.
because it's almost the same. It's like this loud smack. Imagine, these big sea containers,
Yes.
cargo containers. It's like if someone slams one of them as hard as they can.
Oh God.
That's how it sounds like.
Yeah, I don't.
Um,
Yeah, that
and
I
there's
don't like that.
times when I've got my balcony door open and I'm relaxing, or making a video or something here at home. I'm on my sofa making a video, editing, whatever. And then I hear it, and it sends me flying from the sofa onto my feet out the living room door,
Yep.
and I can't have it. And it's just one of those things. It's like when I hear that noise, I get a sensation of like electricity firing up um, firing up the back of my head, like an electrical surge going up the back of my head, and it just sends me over into the other room.
Yeah.
And but hey, that's the way it is.
I
Yeah.
don't. I wouldn't blame you. It's a natural. It's already embedded in there, so it's like that
Mm,
natural reaction to.
definitely.
Yeah, it's like
Yeah.
danger, red flag.
Mm. I mean, fireworks don't have a problem. I can watch fireworks because I'm expecting it. But it's
Right.
when it's unexpected, that's when I fly out.
Yep. Oh yeah, absolutely. Um, my grandfather had a problem with fireworks, and my grandmother did too a little bit. Like she didn't like the louder crack, like the pop, like Roman candle type
Yeah,
ones. She absolutely hated
yeah, I
them,
know
and
you
that was former military right there. She just no thank you. But what
mean.
profession other than your own would you like to attempt?
Mm.
Yeah, it's one of
I
those
would say
questions.
either either script writing
Mhm.
or editing. So going into movies or TV show, working for TV. I mean, what's the? I mean, my videos, the scripts I write for my editors are okay.
Right.
They're not bad. My editing is better than my script writing and video making. I can sort of tell, let's say if I want to put an effect in something or, when to cut something off and everything else. I'm good at that, you know.
Right.
But however, when I create something, I know what I want to do. Writing the script for it, I can write it. The hardest part though is finding the materials. So what I would love to do is, write scripts and also do editing.
Mhm.
Maybe for a studio or something like that.
That's cool. I'm on board
Yeah.
there. Yeah. What profession would you not like to do?
I wouldn't want to be a policeman.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah. That's too much. Yeah, I think about all the stuff they see every day. And I'm like,
but yeah, there's also the thing about coppers is you know, on one hand, I feel very, very sorry for them. On the other hand, I don't like them.
Yeah.
And the
Right.
reason and it's for the same reason that I feel sorry for him, but at the same time don't like him, is that well, at least. in Britain, they have to work on a quota system. So they have to have so many arrests, depending on
Uh,
what grade they are. I mean, if they're just like you guys say, a beat cop or a detective, obviously there's a different standard, I would imagine.
right,
You but they still have to work on a quota system. So on one hand, they are out there after real criminals. It takes a lot longer to get these real criminals, but on the same time, because they have to meet this quota, otherwise they'll lose the job because they get reviewed.
right.
Is that they'll pick up someone for dropping a cigarette on the floor, or maybe driving 1 or 2 kilometers or miles over the limit,
Mm-hmm.
and
Yep.
it's a bit shit, but okay,
That's the same way it is
it's
here. Yeah, they have some of the districts here and precincts, whatever. They have the
mm,
same thing. And when I lived in Arizona, it was like I don't know how to explain this properly, but it was very reminiscent of. I can't explain it without getting like a little
yeah, okay,
extreme, but it was more like a Gestapo type thing in there because the cops were so tight on the citizens. I know for a while, and this was under Sheriff Joe Arpaio, and this was
mm,
around the time of the immigration stuff. There, papers, please. Like people had to carry their papers with them and things like that. I had a friend that was detained because he looked Hispanic and he wasn't.
mm,
Um, and it was just that kind of feeling and just I can't tell you how many times like would be driving down the road and be pulled over just because no reason just they would make there would be some random thing they would get you for and it was like what the hell are you even and you have to go to court and it get dismissed or whatever but it was a waste of time and money and uh, living under
yeah,
that for many years though I was like no I don't want to live here anymore so I mean police are going to be different everywhere and I know that but I would never want that job it's just way too much and
yeah. It's
no
not the best job in the world.
no
No,
it's a very thankless job in some ways you have to love what you do in order to do that
yeah,
job last
yeah. It's not
question
very well paid either.
exactly um
Mm.
the last question is if heaven exists what would you like to hear God say when you arrive at the pearly gates
What would I expect God to say to me?
yeah what would you like him to say to you if when you arrived at the pearly gates
Where
yeah
do you think you're going?
You're, yeah, I'm gonna need to sit down with your son. You can't just walk in here.
Yeah,
But yeah,
where do you think you're going? Yeah.
exactly. But I really appreciate you coming on today and hanging out. I know.
Thank you for having me on.
Oh, absolutely. And tell people where they can find you. I'm gonna make sure that your links and stuff are gonna be in the description. People will see some pop-ups on the screen here that have your Twitter account and your YouTube and anything else that you wanted to plug. Please go ahead and tell them a little bit where they can find you.
Well, you can find me on Twitter at Continuum Trek. You can also find me here on YouTube under obviously Continuum Trek. But also you can also find me on sorry, excuse me. You can also find me on Facebook page Continuum Trek. There's also a group called Continuum Trekkers.
Okay, cool.
Cool.
I'll make sure that those links are in there. But for everyone who's hung out with Continuum and me today, really appreciate it. And I'm so glad you could hang out today. I really always appreciate everybody making time out of their day because I
I'm
know.
glad to be. I've been looking forward to it for a
Oh,
couple of weeks.
I'm so glad. I know we had to schedule really far ahead because of small Continuum treks and squirrels. So we had to figure that out. But I'm
Yeah,
really glad that we were able
yeah,
to
we
do
got it
this.
there.
But thank you to everyone who's been
Definitely.
listening. Have a wonderful afternoon or evening wherever you're at and whatever you're doing. And I will talk to you guys next time.